So today we're going to be looking at how to create a realistic black on Abaddon's armour. So first, a few considerations. I get asked a lot of times how to go about painting black, which I infuriatingly respond, what kind of black? Do you want a chipped black? Do you want a highly reflective black? Do you want something that looks like cement, or do you want it to look like that pristine sheen you get in the car? Once you start to analyse exactly what kind of black you're trying to create, that's when you can start to develop your own colour schemes. That's when you can start to develop the chipping schemata and the weathering, and just giving the life to the armour, giving it texture, giving it believability. So for this armour plate, where he's set in the heresy, where this narrative of this model is, Abaddon's about to attack Logan. They've just come down onto the planet, and there's a final confrontation between the two. So imagine this guy's armour. It's pretty well worn. It isn't the most pristine. It is slightly battle worn. Yeah. So there's a few ways you can go about doing this, purely by brush, but today I'll be showing you through the airbrush. So I'm using the Iwata HPCH 0.4. You may hear wind in the background. It's it's not my compressor, it's the air filtration unit, just to make sure I'm not inhaling a lot of these fumes. So, first colour I'll be using is German grey. Now, the beautiful thing about Vallejo paints, especially with their greys, is that they come slightly pigmented with another colour. So in this case, with German grey, you see a slight amount of turquoise in there. Before we continue, let's just adjust the colour balance. Should have done this beforehand. Colour. Okay, that should do. So I'm just going to add a touch of Forge Weld solution, Forge Weld airbrush solution in here. Let's start painting. Okay, so whenever you come across a miniature like this, it may be a bit complicated. You may not know exactly where to put the shadows and highlights initially. So what I'd recommend, doing the zenithal highlight. Zenithal just means highlighting from above, from a single light source. So let's go for it. So nice, if you can see the way I'm using the airbrush, small concentric circles. Always moving the airbrush just to make sure I have the best control over it I possibly can. I undercoated the miniature with Formula P3 black. I find it's by far and away the best primer on the market. It dries slightly matte, like a slightly matte grey. See a little bit better. Okay, so that's the initial highlight. That's our first layer. I'm just going to dump the colour into this. I'm using an old towel I have next to me. It looks a bit like a piece of modern art right now. The airbrush cleaner I'm using is Medea Combat Art airbrush cleaner. Just to leave you guys know, I'm not sponsored by anybody, so I'm not getting any kickbacks from recommending these. Just thought you'd like to know as we go along. So with the next layer, I'm not going to be too worried about cleaning every single piece of grey out of there. And for the next layer, let's use something different. Let's use medium sea grey. So again, Vallejo. Just going to add a touch of this. It's a slightly lighter grey, has more white, more beige in it. I'm going to be a bit more focused on where I'm placing my highlights now. So I want the very highest highlight to be running along the ridge here. So let's make sure it's on camera. Bottom of his, I guess around his nipple. Along the line here. Top of the armour plate. A bit of overspill there, so you can see it's not that neat. I'm not overly worried about it, because with the airbrush it's all sketching. It's just the sketching stage we have going on here. See if we can adjust the focus. Great. Okay, so I'm going to dump out that solution. On top of this, I will add white. Now, white tends to be one of those problem colours when it comes to airbrushing. Most people have a slightly smaller nozzle, and that gives you problems. Other people are using airbrush paints that clog up awfully easily. The best, by far the best white I've seen or have used personally is Medea Com Art Opaque White. Bust the top off this a few months ago. That's why it's wrapped up in cellophane. So again, I wasn't too careful in getting rid of the rest of the grey. So that's quite a step up from our last layer. Again, no need to worry, I'm going to add a bit more thinner in here. That's painting the highlights. With the airbrush layers, I would always recommend that you go slightly higher. You push the contrast slightly more, because you can correct it very easily in later stages, or simply when it comes to the brush stage. So I'm going to be drawing inside the lines I've already created. So a nice gradient going in there. See how I placed the miniature on its side, so it's just catching the very edge of that. There's a bit of overspill onto that side, but we can clear that up later. And again, there's a bit of overspill here. I don't tend to work that neatly with an airbrush, purely because I think of this as a sketching tool. This isn't a finishing tool for me. You see, I made a bit of a mistake there, chatting to you fine folks. So I'm just going to try and lift off as much as I can with a brush. And any minor mistakes you make, don't worry about it. They're not accidents, they are happy accidents. Yeah, it's a nice way to think of it. When I want to be slightly more accurate with my airbrush, I bring it closer into the subject. but I don't want to create too fine of a line with this, purely because the airbrush can't replicate brush technique. So that part's going to be red, giving myself a little bit of a head start with the red stage by highlighting with light here. Okay, so we've established our lights. Now we want to plunge back into the shadows. If we left like that, it's a very nice miniature, it's very nicely painted as it is, but it's quite unsatisfying leaving it purely at the airbrush stage. It's very nebulous, the details aren't really exploited, and with a miniature like this, you really do want to exploit all the details you possibly can. £50–60 for this miniature. Make sure you hit all those highlights, you hit all the details. Okay, so we've gone in with black. Favourite black I use? Medea Com Art, opaque black. You can see how much I love it by just how bust up it is. So, pure black into this. Do a cheats way of mixing with the painting. So I'm holding the tip and a bit of blowback. Okay. Being very careful with this, just to establish the darkness. Now the beautiful thing of using the base colour that we use is slightly grey. It dries a slightly grey black. And when we do add black into it, it creates such a strong contrast for the shadow. Doing the knee pad here, so I'm going to hold it at the edge. It may not be the most visible of this, but just to get it right, I'm going to hold it on the edge and hit it along the side. There you go. See, there is a touch of overspill there, but again we can correct that with a brush stage. See, there's quite a stark contrast between the highlighted areas and the airbrushed areas that are present. Don't worry about that. We will be adding a filter layer on top of this, just to unite the two. So, at this point, I want to add a filter layer over the entirety of the miniature. If you listen to the podcast, the Age of Darkness podcast, we often talk about filter layers and how it can affect the underlying mood of a miniature, especially when it comes to black. So at this point, I've established light, I've established shadows, but overall, with airbrushing, you can end up with a slightly desaturated look to it. It's not, the colours aren't as vibrant as they could be when using just a brush alone. And you need to juice them up a little bit. You need to add a few layers of washes on top. Now a filter layer is something we place over the entirety of the miniature, over the entirety of the black portions. And it will affect the underlying layers. So it will change, it will mute down, it will tone up, it will just give it a sorry, flash the camera. For this, I want to get rid of most of the black. I do want to give this more of a thorough clean than I normally would. I don't want any of the black interrupted. So, for the filter layer, we're going to get Scale 75's Adriatic Blue. It's beautiful turquoise colour. I'm just going to add a lot thinner. At this point, if you do have any acrylic thinners, it may be worth employing them at this point. Anyway, I'll show you the thickness of it. That's it. It's barely noticeable. So I'm going to apply this over the entirety of the miniature. If it's noticeable on the first pass over, the paint's too thick. These layers I describe as being frustratingly thin. We want a very thin layer. So that's the first layer. Right, I'll trust the hair dryer. We'll be adding the second layer. And that will unite the two tones between them. It just gives the armour that very cold, toned down appearance. Games Workshop often recommends when it comes to black that you use cool tones to highlight it. While this isn't always strictly true, because with leather, for example, you do want a warm highlighted layer, so you can use things like a desaturated yellow colour, say a bone colour, browns washed into the recesses. Even with this armour, I feel it could benefit from certain portions of the armour being highlighted in a warmer, yellowier beige rather than a cold blue. But we'll come on to that at a later stage. From here, it's dealer's choice whether you want to continue with the airbrush or whether you want to dive straight into the brush technique. I think for this piece, it could benefit from perhaps 2 more layers with the airbrush. This is something you'll develop for yourself, this kind of natural knack for knowing where to place highlights and where to place shadows. So I'm just going to add black. Back in here to reinforce those shadows. I think that's good. I don't want to modulate that anymore. It's one of those things that I feel like I could do with the airbrush, but I know the brush work technique will be so much better for the remainder of this miniature. So, that was the video on how to airbrush Abaddon's armour. There will be a part 2 where we go on to explain how we manipulate these basic tones with a brush to develop the armour. Okay, this is part 2 of Abaddon's armour. In the last video, I showed you how to put down the basic tones for the airbrushing. Now I'm going to show you how to refine it further with the brush. So I'm using a wet palette, the red previously that I've coloured in the shoulder pads. I've got black from Vallejo, Vallejo Game Colour Black, Vallejo Model Colour Field Blue, and Vallejo Model Colour Off-White. And I also have Adriatic Blue for a filter layer. So let's delve into the black. Just going to water down. The black for the brush.
I want to refine some of those shadows. So under here, just refining the detail. So a touch of white with field blue. Now, field blue is a very turquoise pigmentation to the grey, which works well with our Adriatic blue. Be very careful here. With this colour as well, we can, sorry, excuse me, put in a couple of scratches as well. Show you how to highlight on this surface as well. It can be quite difficult to highlight on a rounded surface like this. So I'm just following the line of the established highlight we made with our airbrush. I can build the contrast. Go in with a touch of black, just for the shadowed areas. To dry it. Let's work on this highlight a touch more. So I'm just increasing the amount of off-white in the field blue. as I go along, I'm going to add a couple of scratches just to make the armour look more 3D. Make it look a bit more lifted and give it a bit of character. So I'll just show you how to go about painting the black on the leg here. And it's the same technique across the entirety of the miniature. It really is a beautiful sculpt. So full of character, so full of detail. Okay, as I'm waiting for that to dry, I'm just going to move on to other portions, start the highlighting process. Let's define this. So you can see how the airbrushing stages give us a guideline, gives a good guideline where to refine the highlights. It's by no means a finishing tool. You can't just airbrush a miniature and expect it to look good. It will just look airbrushed. You need to finish the job off. You're only doing half the job if you just use an airbrush. I'm using a Winsor Newton Series 7 number 1. It's quite a large brush, but as long as it comes to a fine tip. I know there are a few stray strands you can probably see on the camera, but it does come to a very fine tip. That's the key. Add a touch more white to this. At least you've got some pretty nice reflections going on here. Okay, let's deepen it down with some black. Okay, good. Going with the lighter spots of white, just those pinprick highlights. Let's finish off this leg. There's a bit more work on it just to really align the rest of the highlighters coming out of the balloon. Okay, if you look at this in comparison to that leg, see there's a whole heap of difference between the two. So, showing you a basic process of how you go about that. I'll show a thumbnail of the completed miniature afterward. If you have any questions, please get in touch.